When I'm coaching my students and they're struggling with their studying and they're telling me that they don't have enough time to study, and I introduce them to the concept of spaced repetition, if they've never done it before, it can often have a massive positive effect on not only the time that they save because they're studying more efficiently, but also on the grades that they achieve. Studies have shown that time and time again, spacing out your studying is incredibly valuable for remembering large amounts of information in an extremely time efficient way. Maybe the simplest and most effective memorization technique to save you time when revising for your exams. So let me explain how exactly I use spaced repetition leading up to my exams. So let's say I have an exam approaching on the 31st of December. It's kind of a weird date to have an exam on, but just for simplicity's sake. So I would start revising early, and this alone is massive. One of the worst things you can do is start revising for your exams just days before it, and one of the easiest things you can do to boost your grade is to start revising for an exam super early. And I mean really early. And often I start revising 6 weeks before the exam. If the exam is on the 31st of December, I'd start revising on around the 15th of November. Then 3 days later on the 18th, I'd recap what I just learned on the 15th. And then I'd learn more information. Then 3 days later on the 21st, I'd recap what I learned over the last 2 sessions and then learn more information. So you can see what I'm doing here. I'm recapping the information that I learned in the previous revision sessions, as well as adding new information on top of that. So essentially the pool of knowledge that I'm learning is increasing and increasing. So I'm not trying to cram in everything in 1 or 2 days. Instead, I have smaller study sessions that are spread out over 3-day periods that involve 2 parts. The review stage, where I review the old information, and the adding on stage, where I add more information and study and review new information. So doing it this way with 3-day rests in between would look something like this. Day 1, studying the material. Days 2 and 3, take a break from that subject. Day 4, recap the material learned on day 1 and learn more information. Days 5 and 6, take a break from that subject. Day 7, recap the material learned on day 1 and day 4 and learn more information. Studying this way is so effective because it allows the neurons in your brain responsible for remembering the material to be strengthened. It takes advantage of the spacing effect that shows that learning is more effective when study sessions are spaced out over a longer period of time, rather than by cramming in studying over a short period of time. There are countless studies, there are so many studies that show the effectiveness of the spacing effect, or spaced repetition, whatever you want to call it. And the studies go all the way back to 1939, when Professor at the University of Iowa, Herbert Spitzer, tested the effects of spaced repetition on 6th grade students who were learning and memorizing facts about science. Spitzer tested over 3,600 students, and his results showed a significant increase in the number of facts that the students in the group that were using spaced repetition were able to memorize, compared with the students in the group that were not using spaced repetition. And since that study, it was an old study conducted back in the 1930s, there's been increasing research indicating that actually increasing the space between study sessions yields an even greater positive effect on memory. So for example, instead of studying for subjects every 3 days, the research is suggesting that you should actually go from studying every 3 days to every 5 days to every 7 days, and slowly increasing the rest period that you have between study sessions. So spaced repetition with expanding intervals is believed to be so effective because with each expanded interval of repetition, it becomes more difficult to retrieve the information because of the time elapsed between the study periods. So this in turn creates a deeper level of processing of the learned information in long-term memory at each point. Now, there are various ways you can implement spaced repetition into your study strategy. Personally, I use the good old-fashioned flashcards, and this is actually called the Leitner system, which was proposed by German science journalist Sebastian Leitner back in the 1970s. And what I would do is I'd have a thick pile of flashcards, each one with a fact or a date or a formula or a simple concept that I needed to remember, and I'd go through the pile of flashcards. As I went through them, I'd put each flashcard on one of 3 piles. The first pile was the flashcards that I had memorized well. The second pile were flashcards that I could kind of remember. I could remember them, but they would take quite a lot of thinking and poking around my brain to get them. And the third and final pile was where I put the flashcards that I just couldn't remember well and I needed to spend more time on. And so with the 3 piles of flashcards, every morning as soon as I woke up, I'd spend just about 10 minutes or so going through the pile of flashcards where I could remember the information on them. Over time, with consistent learning every 24 hours, that pile would get smaller and smaller until it was completely gone because I'd remembered the information on all of it. So then eventually all the flashcards were just in one pile, the pile where I could remember everything. Spaced repetition saved me so much time at university. Studying for hours and hours every day, 7, 8, 9 hour study sessions all in one go, are sometimes just not necessarily, especially if you're taking advantage of spaced repetition strategy. Short study sessions, so 10-minute, 30-minute, 1 hour study sessions on each topic, but spaced out over 24 hours or 48 hours or 3 days, even 7 or 14 days, can often be more effective than studying for a full 8 hours on one topic. Breaking that 8-hour study session into 8 separate 1-hour study sessions can often be a far smarter way of studying. And if you need any further guidance or support regarding spaced repetition, maybe you're a bit unsure, just drop any comments or questions below and I'll do my best to reply to every single one of them.